So good afternoon everyone, I am John Cornelis M. Lasarte, your reporter for today, and my topic is all about the learner-centered psychological principles. It is introduced to us by the American Psychological Association, or what we call the APA, in the year 1990s. So why is it called the learner-centered psychological principles? It is because the researches and the theories in education was integrated from that of the theories and researches in psychology. It is made in order to create or design new and more effective framework in education. Until now, it is integrated because its effectiveness is observed in the educational system, such as the teaching and learning process. Learning this one would help you understand better the nature of the learners and the nature of the learning process as well. Through this knowledge, you now have the ideas on what strategies probably or what approaches you are going to use in order to maximize the learning of your students and for you to become an effective teacher. Well, I know if you're watching this video, you wanted to become a good teacher someday, a best teacher you could ever be. So you need to listen very well, because understanding your learner is one of the initial steps to become a great teacher. Let us now have our lesson objective for today, which is to understand the 14 learner-centered psychological principles as applied in teaching learning process. Our 14 learner-centered principle is divided into 4 categories: the cognitive and metacognitive factors, motivational and affective factors, developmental and social factors, and individual difference factors. Now let us deal with the cognitive and metacognitive factors first. Let's have here the principle 1, the nature of the learning process, which says that the learning of the complex subject matter is most effective when it is an intentional process of constructing meaning from information and experience. So let's deal with the learning process. When we're talking with the learning process, we have different type of learning process, like habit formation and motor learning, and the learning that involves generation of knowledge or cognitive skills and learning strategies. Now I would like to highlight some phrases here, which is the intentional process. So in intentional process, your learning inside the classroom is intentional. Why do I say so? Because the teacher come into your class with an end in mind already. He or she has already the objectives of the lesson, what you will learn right after the class, and he has already the strategies, that approaches that he can use in order for you to meet those objectives. And he had already designed an assessment test to know whether you learned the lesson or not. So it means it is an intentional process. The next phrase is constructing meaning. As educators, we go inside the classroom not just to feed the learners with information, but rather we help our learners to use the knowledge they have acquired and the experience they have in order to construct meaning. We do not spoon-feed our learners, but rather we help them to become constructivists. They will become creators of knowledge, creators of meaning, with of course the guidance of teachers. So that is the nature of learning. We have here the characteristics of a successful learner. So you could assess your students, or for now you could assess yourself whether you are a successful learner or not. The first one is active. When can you say that the student is active? So when they take part in teaching learning process. So during discussion, they must listen attentively and jot down notes. While during recitation, they share their answers, ideas, thoughts about the certain topic. During activities, they should collaborate with teacher as well as their classmates. Next one is goal-oriented. They set goals for themselves. They go inside the classroom because they have certain goals to be met. They wanted to become a professional, like a teacher, an engineer, a doctor, or whatever they wanted to be. They set their long-term goals, but they must also have the ability to set their short-term goals, so they would see the significance of every lesson you share to them. So the learners must always be goal-oriented. Next is self-regulating. They have the ability to monitor the progress, to monitor and assess their learning strategies, whether it is effective or not. And they have the ability to remain focused on learning, so they will not be distracted with environmental, peer, and other factors or forms of disturbance. And the last one is the learning initiative. They must assume personal responsibility for contributing to their own learning. Students must not blame teachers for what they have only learned in the lesson. Instead, they must be accountable for their own learning outcomes. So that is the characteristics of successful learner. Now let us have the principle 2, goals of the learning process. It says that the successful learner, over time and with support of instructional guidance, can create meaningful, coherent representation of knowledge. In the strategic nature of learning, students must be goal-directed. In learning, teacher is not the only one who sets the goal to be met, but students do too. To construct useful representation of knowledge, and to acquire the thinking and learning strategies necessary for continued learning success across lifespan, student must generate and pursue personally related goals. We are all aware that students have their own short and long-term goals to be met, and as educators, we assist the learners in creating meaningful learning goals that are consistent with both personal and educational aspiration and interest, helping them to deepen understanding of subject matters, bridge the gap between the students' short-term goals, and transform it into stepping stones towards meeting their long-term goals. So that is our principle number 2. Let us now proceed to principle number 3, construction of knowledge. It says that the successful learner can link new information with existing knowledge in meaningful ways. Knowledge widens and deepens as students continue to build links between new information, experiences, and their existing knowledge base. The nature of these links can take a variety of forms, such as adding to, modifying, or recognizing existing knowledge or skills. How these links are made or developed may vary in different subject areas and among students with varying talents, interests, and abilities. However, unless new knowledge and understanding, this new knowledge remains isolated, which means cannot be used most effectively in new tasks and does not transfer daily to readily to new situation. In this matter, educators can assist learners in acquiring and integrating knowledge by a number of strategies that have been shown to be effective with learners of varying abilities, such as concept mapping and thematic organization or categorizing. That is the principle number 3, the construction of knowledge. Now let's move on to principle number 4, which is strategic thinking. In strategic thinking, it says that the successful learner can create and use a repertoire of thinking and reasoning strategies to achieve learning goals. Learners apply strategic thinking in learning, reasoning, problem solving, and concept learning in order to reach their learning and performance goals, and apply their knowledge in novel situation. When we say novel situation, these are the situation that is something new to us. Now, learners expand the repertoire of their strategies by reflecting on the methods which they see fit to them, observing or interacting with appropriate models, and receiving guided instruction and feedback from the teachers as they assist the learners in developing and applying and assessing their strategic learning skills, which enhances the learning outcomes. The next is the Principle 5, thinking about thinking, or in other words, we call it metacognition. It says that higher order strategies for selecting and monitoring mental operations facilitate creative and critical thinking. As a student, they must have the ability to monitor their own learning and assess their strategies of learning, whether it is effective or not. If it is not effective, then think of another strategy to be applied in order to boost your own learning, right? Okay, that is the fifth principle of thinking about thinking, or metacognition. Next is the Principle 6, the context of learning. It says that learning is influenced by environmental factors, including culture, technology, and instructional practices. So, here, learning does not occur in a vacuum. Why do I say so? So, for you to fully understand this phrase, let me give you an idea about vacuum. Vacuum is a place where when you drop a heavy metal ball and a feather, the time where they reach the ground is the same. It means that there is no external factors affecting the free fall between the heavy metal ball and the feather. So they fall at the same time. So that means there is no external factor. So what we have said earlier is that learning does not occur in a vacuum. So that means in learning there is always have an external factors or factors that affects learning. So here teachers play a major interactive role with both the learners and the learning environment. One factor is the cultural or group influence on students that can impact many educationally relevant variables such as motivation, orientation toward learning, and ways of thinking. Another one, technologies and instructional practices must be appropriate for learners' level of prior knowledge and cognitive abilities in their learning and thinking strategies. So way back in my junior high day, I would like to share I created my very first thesis entitled The Effects of Technology on Enthusiasm for Learning of the Students. And it has been found out that the use of technology in the classroom setting boosts the eagerness of the students to learn. So that proves that involvement of technology is one of the factors that boosts the learning. Then the classroom environment, particularly the degree which it is nurturing or not, can also have significant impact on student learning. That means that the environment must be student friendly. Environmental factors play a very vital role in the learning of the students. So you have to be sensitive with the environment. So that is the Principle 6, the context of learning. So to sum it up, cognitive and metacognitive factors was comprised of the nature of learning process, goals of the learning process, construction of knowledge, strategic thinking, thinking about thinking, and context of learning. So Now let's go back here to the four categories. Now let's move on to the motivational and affective factors. In motivational and affective factors, we have here the principle 7, which is motivational and emotional influences on learning. It says that what and how much is learned is influenced by the learner's motivation. Motivation to learn, in turn, is influenced by the individual's emotional states, beliefs, interests, and goals, and habits of thinking. So motivation is just like a fuel to go on. It is our fuel to exert for effort in whatever we are doing. We do it because we enjoy it, and we see it is relevant. We see its relevance, and we know it's meaningful. So the motivation must be sustained by teachers, so that the students will keep on exerting their effort on learning, and they will keep on doing their best during the teaching and learning process. Learning is also influenced by emotional states and interests, meaning to say, they must feel the enthusiasm on learning. The students' beliefs about themselves as learners and the nature of learning have a marked influence or motivation. Motivational and emotional factors also influence both the quality of thinking and information processing, as well as individuals' motivation to learn. Positive emotions such as curiosity generally have enhanced motivation and facilitate learning and performance. Mild anxiety can also enhance the learning and performance by focusing the learner's attention on a particular task. However, intense negative emotions such as anxiety, panic, rage, insecurity, and related thoughts such as worrying about competence, ruminating about failure, fearing punishment, ridicule, or stigmatizing labels generally detract from motivation, interfere with learning, and contribute to low performance. So we can say that the rich internal world of thoughts, beliefs, and goals and expectations for success or failure can enhance or interfere with the learner's quality of thinking and information processing. Now we have the principle 8, intrinsic motivation to learn. In intrinsic motivation to learn, the learner's creativity, higher order thinking, and natural curiosity all contribute to motivation to learn. Intrinsic motivation is stimulated by the task of optimal novelty and difficulty, relevant to personal interest and providing for personal choice of control. We are all aware that students have different perceptions of optimal novelty and difficulty. We have fast learners, slow learners, and so on and so forth. They also differ in relevance, personal choice, and control. Thus, in order to support learners' curiosity and motivation, the teachers must attend to individual differences, giving tasks appropriate and complexity and difficulty to the learner's abilities on which they believe they can succeed, and find it interesting, personally relevant, and meaningful, as well as the tasks that are comparable to real-world situation and meet needs for choice and control. This will bring out their curiosity, flexibility, insightful thinking, and creativity, which is the major indicators of learners' intrinsic motivation to learn. So next is the principle 9, the effective motivation on effort. It says that the acquisition of complex knowledge and skills requires extended learner's effort and guided practice. Without learners' motivation to learn, the willingness to exert this effort is unlikely without coercion. If a student is motivated, he or she will extend effort on learning. So in order to achieve high standards of comprehension and understanding, educators must facilitate motivation through purposeful learning activities which they find interesting and personally relevant. This will enhance the positive emotion and boost their intrinsic motivation to learn. So that comprise the motivational and affective factors. The first, motivational and emotional influence on learning, intrinsic motivation to learn, and the effects of motivation on effort. Now let's go back here and deal with the developmental and social factors. For the principle 10, we have here the developmental influence on learning. It says that as individuals develop, they encounter different opportunities and experience different constraints for learning. Learning is most effective when differential development within and across physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domain is taken into account. So, development results may vary because of difference in individual capabilities and intellectual, social, emotional, and physical domains. The development in the said domains were affected by the parent involvement in homes and schooling, as well as cultural and society insights that they get from socializing and interacting within the community. In connection with this, and in order for effective learning to happen, educators must use appropriate materials based on the developmental level of the learners, and they should present it in an enjoyable and interesting way. Despite of the development variation across individuals, it must reach one end goal, the holistic development, in which is the development of the physical, emotional, intellectual, and social domains. So let's proceed to the Principle 11, the social influences on learner. Learning is influenced by social interactions, interpersonal relations, and communication with others. As humans, we are shaped by several factors, from family, fear, community. Relating it to learning, we are also shaped by social factors. Take for example, when doing group works, we're expected to interact and collaborate with others. Little by little, we became used to this kind of activities, leading for us to fully express ourselves and build our self-esteem. Through the process of interaction and socialization, we practice flexible and reflective thinking. We develop personal relationships, and we felt the sense of belonging, self-respect, and self-acceptance that provide a positive climate for learning. With that context, the learner can feel safe to share ideas, actively participate in the learning process, and create a learning community. So that is the developmental and social factors, the developmental influence on learning, and the social influence on learning. So let's proceed to the individual difference factors. In individual difference factors, we have the Principle 12, individual differences in learning, which says that the learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities of learning that are a function of prior experience and heredity. Learners differ in learning capabilities and talents. Thus, it is not new to us that the preference on the pace of learning varies among individuals. But sometimes, it requires modification because there comes the time that this preference we have is not enough to reach our learning goals. In connection to this, educators must be sensitive to individual difference. They must accept it and try to adapt to it by integrating varying instructional method and materials in teaching learning process. So that is the Principle 12. Next is the Principle 13, learning and diversity. It says that learning is most effective when the difference in learners' linguistic, cultural, and social backgrounds are taken into account. In order to boost the motivation and achievement of learners, it is also essential to make them feel and experience that they are valued, respected, and accommodated, despite of their difference in language, ethnicity, race, beliefs, and socioeconomic status. This is through designing and implementing appropriate learning environments. In other words, they should modify instructional setting that will sync with the difference that the learners have. For the final principle, we have the principle 14, standards and assessment. It says that setting appropriately high and challenging standards and assessing the learners and the learning progress, including diagnostic, process, and outcome assessment, are integral parts of the learning process. So what is the purpose of assessment? Assessment does not only provide feedback to the students but also help the teachers to set standards in the learning goals. If the assessment were too easy for the learners, that means the standards is too low and should be modified one step ahead to the level of the learners. The same thing goes with if the result of the assessment shows that the standards was too high enough, the teachers must adjust it to the level just enough to challenge the learners. There are different types of assessment like standardized, performance, and self-assessment. It helps to inform various types of programmatic decisions, the attainment of outcomes, and improve self-directed learning. So that comprises the individual difference factors, the indifference in learning, the learning diversity, and then the standards and assessment. Now, to generalize the topic and to sum it up, we can comprise those 14 learner-centered psychological principles into 5 areas. The first one is the knowledge-based, wherein one's existing knowledge serves as the foundation of all future learning. The learner's previous knowledge will influence new learning, specifically on how he represents new information, makes association, and filter new experiences. The next one is the strategic processing and control. Learners can develop skills to reflect and regulate their thoughts and behaviors as well in order to learn more effectively, which we can involve the thinking about thinking, or what we call the metacognition. The third one is the motivation and effect. The factors such as intrinsic motivation or the motivation from within, reasons from wanting to learn, the personal goals and enjoyment for learning, the tasks that we have crucial role in the learning progress. Then for number 4, we have the development and individual difference. Learning is a unique journey for each person because each learner has his own unique combination of genetic and environmental factors that influence him or her. Then last is the situation or context. Learning happens in context of a society as well as within an individual. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I hope you've learned something, and I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you so much.